If you've been around the channel long enough, you may know that I'm a pretty big fan of RTS games. I grew up with them, and I've been playing them for as long as I can remember. Lately, I've been knee-deep in Age of Empires 2. It's a medieval RTS game with lots to love. And if you're a fan of Melee, then you might be interested in Age of Empires 2. Or maybe not. There are similarities between the two, though at the same time there are also many differences. I mostly want to make this video because I love the RTS genre, and I want to share some of that love. This video is meant to act as a primer to Age of Empires 2. I'll give a brief introduction to the game, note how it's similar to Melee, how it's different, and then just go on to gush about the things I love about it. Got it? Good. If enough people like this video, I'll do an introduction to RTS games in general, as there are a lot of RTS games out there, but I'll burn that bridge when I get there. For now, let's begin. Age of Empires 2 is a real-time strategy game, or RTS game, that is set in the Middle Ages. So, in other words, it's a game that lets you build an empire and raise an army in the name of conquest. Sounds fun, right? Well, there's a bit more to it than that. Actually, there's a lot more to it than that, but it's really easy to understand the core premise of the game. To master the game, however, is a completely different ballpark. But I'll start with the core concepts first. If you're already familiar with RTS games or know what Age of Empires is, you can skip this section. This is more for people who have no exposure to the series. Anywho, the core concepts. Resource gathering. Collecting those sweet resources is important for funding your campaign. Base building. Creating the infrastructure needed to run an empire is crucial if you want to succeed. Train an army. After all, you'll need soldiers to fight your wars and to defend your kingdom. Destroy your foes. You are playing to win, right? This means crushing the opposition into dust and leaving no survivors. Alright, it doesn't need to be that bloodthirsty, but you are trying to win. So that's roughly what Age of Empires 2 is. Now, where does the real-time strategy come in? Oh man, where to start? Well, I guess the simplest explanation is that all these core concepts take place in real time. So while you're collecting resources, your opponent is collecting resources at the exact same time. Same goes for when you're building a base and training an army. Your opponents are doing the same things at the same time, just in a different location of the map. And this is where all the strategy is. I could go on and talk about the strategy component of the game specifically, but then I would be here all day. But to give a couple of quick examples, do you do a full frontal assault and try to break the enemy position with infantry and siege rams? Or do you take your cavalry and try to harass the opponent's villagers, weakening their economy? And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more than what I just mentioned. So much more. But this should give you a sense of just how much depth there is. Before I dive in though, I do want to outline some of the differences between Melee and Age of Empires 2. As you may have guessed by now, they are pretty distinct games. While I think there's some similarities worth talking about, I do want to highlight some of the differences so I don't end up trying to tell you guys that Age of Empires is just some sort of alternate version of Melee. If you want an alternate version of Melee, then I suggest checking out the Resident Evil 5 inventory system. I made a video on it and everything. Okay, but for real, I asked the Melee subreddit what they loved about Melee, and I got a lot of interesting answers. I think two of the biggest differences though are the freedom of movement and how many characters you can control. Which maybe sounds obvious, but let me explain. In Melee, movement is everything. We see all the time in Melee people just doing cool movements. In Age of Empires, you can move individual units, but you don't really get that same level of expression as you do in Melee, at least on an individual level. There's cute micro tricks you can do, but you can't really express yourself with individual unit control. Also in Melee, movement feels tight and fluid. Playing against an opponent is like some sort of dance. It's mesmerizing. In Age of Empires, you're both still dancing, but you're stumbling into each other and maybe sometimes you elbow the other person. What I'm trying to say is that Age of Empires definitely has its own beat, but it's a bit clunkier. So if the movement in Melee is the #1 reason why you play the game, then I don't think I have anything to offer you. While I love Age of Empires, it sure ain't Melee. But on the flip side, Melee sure ain't Age of Empires either. And if you're curious as to how I can rave about a game that has weaker movement options than Melee, all you gotta do is just keep watching the video. When it comes to control in Age of Empires, the hard part stems from the fact that you can control multiple units. In Melee, you can control one character that has seemingly limitless movement options. In Age of Empires, you can control multiple units that have seemingly limitless potential for commands. While there are some things I can do with one unit in Age of Empires, things get much more interesting when I try to issue commands to multiple units at once. For example, I can take these 2 cavalry archers and dance them around this night. Cool, right? But what if I want to manage a naval battle? I have to split up my fire ships so that they don't take too much damage from the demolition ships, all the while making sure that my war galleys have a good attack angle? Or what if, while I'm issuing orders to my army, I'm jumping back home to tell my villagers to build some more farms? I'm trying to manage an army and my economy at the same time. And that is the beauty of Control in Age of Empires. You're trying to juggle as many micro tasks as you possibly can, as opposed to controlling just one character. And juggling those tasks is not an easy feat. What you'll often end up doing is deciding which of the tasks are the most important, and then delegating certain tasks if they're not important enough. For example, you may have to choose between managing your scout versus creating more farms. And to demonstrate what I was talking about, we're going to watch 15 seconds of me playing Age of Empires, and then we're going to point out all of my mistakes. And for reference, I'm a pretty decent player. My friend and I are in the top 15% of team ranked matchmaking. Alright, hello everyone. We're going to just quickly take a look through about maybe 10-15 seconds of me playing Age of Empires, and we're going to point out all the mistakes I made. Quick note, that I am the yellow player right here, and if you see right here, there's some enemy archers in my base, and these are my skirmishers. They're hiding behind the mill, and they're trying to fight the archers. And I guess a couple things before I hit the space button. First of all, this is we're doing a video of a recording, so this is a video of me watching a video. So apologies for the timeline down there. But one thing I do want to know is I've already made a mistake. My town center creates villagers, and I'm not making villagers right now. I can tell because up here, this is my production tab, so I'm upgrading fletching, so that makes my archers more powerful. I have 3 skirmishers in production, and I have a scout, but I don't have any villagers, and that's important because villagers get you resources, so wood, food, gold, stone, and like you can see here, I have some villagers mining gold and some villagers farming. So I'm already not making villagers, so I can't get more money, and that's so important because in RTS games, probably like one of the cardinal rules is that you want to always spend your money. And right now I'm not spending as much money as I can because a villager only costs 50 food, and I have more than enough to purchase a villager. And more villagers lets you get more resources, and if you have more resources, you can spend those resources, and then you get more stuff, and more stuff counters less stuff. So, okay, we're going to keep that in mind, and we'll just play the clip. Oh, I'm not going to be ready for you, though. That's mute the volume, too. Whew, how unprofessional. So, okay. Already, we have a problem. So, this villager right here, she, I think, dies basically for nothing. Okay, so that wasn't good. And then I'm mousing. Oh, this is more of a high-level mistake, or one that could be improved. But I don't know if you saw how I scrolled up to select these guys. What would have been better if I just used the minimap to jump to where those guys were and grab them. That's probably too heavy in the weeds though. So okay, keep continuing. Gonna lose another villager. Okay, no, I'm trying to save her. That's fine. So these archers have completely distracted me. I'm not producing anything right now. Okay, and then I'm jumping over here. So if we go back, so while these archers are out here and I'm fighting them, production got stalled entirely. I still had the food, so I could have kept making villagers. And this is a common thing too. It's I'll constantly get distracted. So in that short, probably 8 seconds of gameplay, I had a villager die for free. I could have tried and saved them to move the villagers, but then also I think more importantly, my production wasn't up to snuff. And if you also want to get further into the weeds, my economy balance is way off because I'm distracted. I have so many people harvesting wood when I don't need that many people on wood. I probably need more people on food. And there's more I could go into. And again, I want to make clear that I'm not a bad player, but I look at this and there's so many things I can improve on. And those 8 seconds, I'm okay, I did this, and this wrong. And again, high levels economy, unit control, camera control, all those things I could have done a better job. And then that's not even including the tactical blunders I made. Economy balance, and then all the mistakes beforehand. So maybe the takeaway from this is that I suck and there's a lot to work on, but either way, there's a lot of room for me to improve despite being a decent player. So yeah, difficult stuff. but you probably get the idea. There's other distinctions between the two games, but I think that goes without saying. Movement and mechanics were the biggest ones I wanted to discuss. If you feel that I missed some other fundamental differences though, please leave a comment. Melee and Age of Empires seem like entirely different games on paper, but there are actually a number of similarities. For starters, both are skill-based games. That is, if you play against someone else, the better player regularly wins. If you beat someone, you earned it. And speaking of skill, mechanics also play a huge role in both games. In Melee, we've seen Zane beat people using Roy as his mechanics are just that much stronger than his opponents. And the same sort of stuff happens in Age of Empires all the time as well. I've seen the Viper, who is a pro Age of Empires player, use very goofy strategies against opponents and win handily as his mechanics are much more refined. And because Age of Empires has such insane mechanical depth, it's very, very easy for players to express themselves in the game and come up with strategies and tactics which really are their own. For example, there's this tournament called the Hidden Cup where the viewers don't know who any of the players are as they have their names hidden, but people are still able to identify who is playing based off of their playstyle alone. It's like in Melee when people can tell apart players by playstyle. You ask any Melee fan and they're going to tell you that Wizrobe and Nun play very different Captain Falcons. And in Age of Empires, some players are so well known for their habits that they've become community memes. For example, there's a player named Dao, and he's famous for building castles that either never get completed or just destroyed seconds after it gets built. Dao is so famous for this that there's a mod for the game that just slaps his face on any castle that's under construction. It's so good, I love it. Hopefully this gives you an idea of how expressive Age of Empires can be. I could go on, but there are other things I want to talk about, like the sense of progression and getting better. As with Melee, Age of Empires has an insanely high skill ceiling. In fact, I'd say with full confidence that it's impossible to play a perfect game of Age of Empires. Can't be done. However, it is possible to improve and refine your play, and that is a deeply enriching experience. When I first started playing, I struggled against the hard AI and would frequently lose against them. But now, I can crush the hardest AI level with ease. Making that progress, and especially seeing my improvements against human opponents, is truly satisfying. This is something you'll have to experience for yourself, but trust me when I say that it exists within Age of Empires. Making progress is addictive. And finally, both Melee and Age of Empires are dynamic. No two games will ever be the same. It's impossible to play the perfect game, so you'll end up having different timings, strategies, approaches, interactions, etc. every single time. Throw in the psychology of the games themselves and the execution of the mechanics, and you get a vibrant new experience each and every time. There's other similarities still, but I think I outlined the big ones, or at least the qualities I thought were similar. There's no real structure to this section, I just want to ramble on about the things I love about this game. I love when you're playing, you hit this almost transcendent zen state known as flow, and your brain is firing on all synapses. You're just like, I can see into the forever, and you're on top of your game and you see everything with absolute clarity. It's like... I love how cool the Teutonic Knight is. The dude has a cape and he just walks with his absolute swagger, and when he attacks something he's all like, hi-ya! And he makes this mockery of other melee units. It's great. I also like how the Spanish have a unit that is a man on a horse with a rifle, which you can get before you can get the guy with the rifle that does not have a horse. Isn't that just wild? What's also wild is when you get the money on a shot, and he just kills so many units with one well-placed shot. It just feels like, yes! Yes!
Can you cut him off, Ryan? I'll come up from behind.
And then there's those moments when you team up with your buddies to crush nerds online, and you have all these great memories of working together to make some epic plays, and you're all just whooping and screaming by the end of it. I could keep going on about the other aspects that I love, but then I'd be talking forever and ever, and the video is long enough as it is. Still, there are many, many things that I enjoy about this game. So now that you've heard me talk, perhaps by now you have an idea of why I'm passionate about the game. At the end of the day, while Melee and Age of Empires 2 are quite different, I do believe there are some common threads that fans of either game can appreciate. To summarize, both are games with high skill ceilings that allow people to express themselves through gameplay. Also, both games are old enough to legally drink in Canada. I also think that some of the stuff I talked about won't really land unless you play RTS games yourself. In a way, it's like trying to describe Melee to someone. It's one thing to explain to people why you love it, it's another thing for people to experience those same things for themselves. If you're at all curious about Age of Empires or RTS games in general, then I definitely recommend trying it out. You can find it on Steam for about $20, though make sure that your computer can run the game and that you pick up the definitive edition. It's the one that came out in 2019. I don't think I have anything else to say, except to thank you for watching the video and for listening to me talk about something that I'm passionate about.